Hi, everybody, and welcome to COVID Chats. My guest today is Steve Gottlieb. Steve is a friend and API brother of mine from Rutgers University. Nowadays, Steve is a rabbinical student at Yeshiva University. He is also a happy newlywed, which was a fresh angle to explore. Later on today, Steve will be moderating a panel on reimagining the Jewish community in the wake of COVID. There will be a Zoom link in the comments for those who wish to join and watch that. Now, without further ado, here is episode 7 of COVID Chats. Hello, Steve, and welcome to episode 7 of COVID Chats.
Hey, everyone, how's it going?
It is going well, considering the circumstances. It's great to be able to talk to you through Zoom. Truly revolutionary technology. Of course, it's, had been around for a little bit and we've had Skype for a while, but I guess we never realized quite how essential these services and products would be. So I'd like to jump right into you. I mean, I know you're a rabbinical student on your way to becoming a rabbi. I'm curious, what is that like in a time like this? I'm sure your classes are online or over Zoom or of some sort, but yeah, how's that switch for you been? And how are you coping with it all?
For sure. So I'll tell you, it's definitely been an interesting transition period for this. When you think of things that can easily translate onto these kinds of digital mediums, rabbinical school really isn't one of them. It's a very old school kind of situation where it's really, teachers directly teaching students, testing us orally, being all in the same room is a very important part of it. So having to transition through there has definitely been a challenge, both because a lot of the older rabbis don't really know so much how to use it, and that a lot of us have to kind of often walk them through things, but also just generally, the very nature of it is sort of contradictory. The fact that you can have a rabbinic program that's so much of a part of it is being there in person, now being kind of across this medium is a little bit revolutionary for everyone. So dealing with that has been very interesting. Thank God it's been going more or less pretty well. The leadership of the yeshiva was the rabbinical school was very much for this kind of transition. They supported it very strongly. They said the most important thing is our safety and well-being. The best way to do that is by everyone kind of staying where they are and switching to this digital format. And so they've been very supportive institutionally, which other institutions, from what I've heard in the grapevine, have been less so. So I consider my institution very lucky to be in the position where we're able to transition so seamlessly into this, though it's not without its bumps.
Sure. And are people helping the rabbis and older teachers sort of adjust to this online? They're not expecting them to learn, how to do this on their own, right? There's good.
Yeah. So I know that they took a day to kind of teach everyone the basics of it.
Okay.
And outside of that, when there have been more of a need to develop a stronger understanding of what features do what, students who have experience have been very fast to kind of step up to the plate and help through it so that things would be as seamless as possible. I'm in an additional program outside of rabbinical school, doing a business program through Columbia. And so that's been using Zoom for ages. So I've seen a lot of the different features already and been helping how I can. Others have been doing the same.
That's great. So in terms of the rabbinical school experience, do you feel that, once this crisis is over, you'll need maybe supplemental in-person hours to sort of make up for some of the learning that's lacking over Zoom? Or do you think that you'll be able to soak up enough through Zoom? Talk to me about of course I understand that it's different to learn, through these video cameras and you're not actually in the same room, but what is it specifically about that makes it so difficult, at least in terms of, learning Torah and learning laws and all of that?
For sure. So first I just need to add some context. So the style of learning at an Orthodox rabbinical school, which is where I am, is very different from the style of learning at places of other denominations within it. It really is very much a mirror of the way that things were, in Europe and even older than that. The style of learning that we do is basically split between class, which is maybe an hour, hour and a half of time.
Mm.
But the 3 hours before that are really dedicated to one-on-one learning, with the books open in front of us, needing it for reference, arguing over what it means, what it doesn't mean, the applications of it. And so a lot of that has been very hard to kind of transition into this kind of a thing. A lot of study partners had to be kind of broken up over it. A lot of people have been doing that learning kind of on their own, still from the book.
Mm.
But because of that, it becomes much more of a self-motivation. The classes are still meeting as scheduled, but there's not an eye over us in the same way that there used to be in making sure that we were doing the learning to prepare for those classes. So I think what you have is kind of two types of people. You have the types of people who are still either meeting with their study partner regularly and keeping on top of it that way, or really setting in rigid schedules for themselves to, still have 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. open to be looking at the books and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have the kinds of people who say, things are a little bit more laid back now, or at home.
Right.
And because of that, they're still coming to class and they're still learning the material that way. But there's sort of a gap in the internalization that I think is going to need to be made up to some degree, just in order to get the full of it. Thankfully, most people that I know are in the former category. But I'm sure that there are going to be situations where you need to be really on top of yourselves.
Yes.
To be able to do it. And, knowing each other, if you've had that or not.
That's true. Yeah, definitely. It takes, if you're a driven person, if you're highly motivated, you'll be able to champion yourself and get the most out of the education, even in these trying times. But yeah, it's certainly easy to take a break when things like this are going on. I mean, in some ways, I do feel like there has to be a little bit of an acceptance on teachers' parts that special guest.
Sorry, that was my wife.
No problem. When we get to, I have some questions about what it's like as a newlywed, but I want to get to that in a second. No, yeah. So I just feel like there has to be some acceptance on teachers' parts of just that, like, maybe for rabbinical students it's different, but for people who are doing Zoom conferences for high school students and for middle school students, like, I feel like the material has to shift a little bit. Like, we can't just try to replicate a teacher talking in the classroom. And I know that's very difficult last minute because lesson plans aren't created with that in mind and all of that. But I guess, yeah, have any of your teachers been pivoting the material or pivoting their teaching style, maybe trying to teach less, teach a little more broadly? Talk to me about that.
Right. So I guess there are really two kinds of classes at least in my style of rabbinical seminary. So the kind that's really sit in front of the book for a few hours and then the teacher is going to kind of review the core concepts, but it doesn't replace that initial learning. That hasn't really shifted. There hasn't really been any effort to do that because the rabbis assume that we're all on top of things and that we're going to be doing the private learning.
Right.
And presumably that'll show on how we do on our tests.
Sure.
The other style of classes is much more of the kind of pastoral training, right? The public speaking, counseling, those kinds of things. And those have shifted a little bit as far as the style of presentation. It's become much more discussion-based as opposed to relying on readings, for example. It's become much more like everyone's logging onto Zoom, everyone has their videos on, so there's sort of accountability there. And it really has become very discussion-heavy in order to kind of counteract the fact that, okay, you're not necessarily going to have the time to be doing these readings. You're not necessarily going to be on top of yourselves as you've been. So how do we counteract that and make sure you're still getting out of this class what you need to then go on and be rabbis in this situation?
Right.
Those have been shifting.
And it gradually, is it sort of day by day we're like, I will take a different tack this day, or how long has this been going on for you? When did this shift happen?
Right. So there's definitely been trial and error. YU went digital about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
In the school that I'm at. So at first, it was kind of a gray area where they didn't know what they were going to be doing. The administration was arguing very much about if we should try to be in person but minimize class sizes and spread out the timing, or if we wanted to be in person. Once it showed how serious the situation was, basically everyone was on the same page. We need to switch to digital. And so once that happened, it was very, very quick to do that transition. Um, but it's definitely been a little rocky with that.
Sure.
Most of the classes started out basically like, we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing and hope it translates.
Mm.
And then as we've kind of reached situations where maybe this doesn't work as well, maybe we need to kind of shift something new. So then professors have been shifting to play along.
Mm.
But it definitely depends. You need to hit that rock first before you know that it's there sometimes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't just assume all the speed bumps will be in the places that they are,
Yeah.
right? Other things come up and some things go smoothly when, you thought they wouldn't.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, what have some of your rabbis, some of the people who have been teaching you, some of your mentors, what have they been saying about this pandemic? And yeah, I mean, does it tie in? Do they tie it into overall theology or
Mhm.
religious points of view, or is it just something that's a sort of natural disaster?
Right. So my direct mentors have been very, very firm um, on this idea that the way that we respond to this is by maximizing the amount of lives that we can save as a community.
Okay.
Um, a lot of them didn't really touch the whole "why is this happening" question. What they've really been saying mostly is that this is happening. We are going through this. And so we need to figure out what we can do in practice to lower the curve, let hospitals be able to handle the amount of people that they're getting
Yeah.
and do that. So they came out very strongly on that.
Mm-hmm.
In the town that I'm from, for example, the rabbinic organization put out a notice very early saying that all the synagogues should be closed, saying to minimize contact with each other. And they were in consultation with hospitals that entire time. And throughout their statements, were always just following this general principle of saving lives and doing things that will maximize saving lives, even if it seems extreme.
Mm.
Because ultimately, the top priority is that the people, both within our community and beyond, are able to get through this crisis and be back with their families as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
So thankfully, that's been the situation with a lot of my direct teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly the rabbinic authorities in my life. That being said, um, there have been interactions with people a little bit more in the to the right of us religiously, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
people who are more in the kind of ultra orthodox camps, and they've been taking a little bit of a different approach to the situation. Some of them have been closing and maintaining those kinds of things, but more from perspective of this is what the government wants us to do, so we're going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's not because they care less about saving lives, God forbid. I think it is more that they think that um, they're going to be able to stem it in different ways. For example, in our community where I am, we believe very strongly that we should be praying, we should be kind of calling on God to try to be getting us through this and all of that. But we also acknowledge that science is a thing and the doctors are saying that this is going to spread and that no matter how much we pray on that, there's only so much that we can do that's going to directly be stemming this as soon as possible.
Right.
Whereas kind of the more um, let's say fundamentalist that one becomes, the more that they say, gathering together and praying is what's going to be fixing this. So you see in those communities actually more calls to come together as a community and being a lot more inclined to keep synagogues open at
Right.
this time. Though I do think that as of at least the end of last week, everyone was on the same page and all the synagogues have been closed, at least in the United States.
Yes. Yes.
But it's definitely a differing approach. And it's been interesting kind of seeing how our rabbis have been responding to that, what they've been telling us to do. And I'm certainly glad that my institution falls on the side that it does on that. I certainly believe in erring on the side of caution, making sure that as many lives are saved as possible,
Totally.
keeping up with our prayers and making sure that we make sure that God knows that we want this to be over and for as much people to live as possible.
Mm.
But also acknowledging that the situation is what it is and that there's only so much we can do without needing to retreat and institute these social distance policies.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that your rabbis have talked about it, and I'm glad that they weren't harping on the why, just of like the what we need to do as a result of it. It
Mhm.
seems, as a philosophy major, the idea of helping as many lives as possible pretty utilitarian approach right there, which I think is proper there, right? Let's just try to lift as many people up in a time like this as possible. Let's not
Mhm.
make distinctions now. Something I've seen in the news, maybe you can comment on this, but there's some religious communities in Lakewood that were still having weddings and were getting broken up
Mhm.
by the police. I'd love your thoughts on this, because for me, that just seems absolutely crazy. Like, I
Right.
mean, maybe if there's a requirement that you have to get married within a certain period of time or this or that, I mean, I can understand that, but who would want to have their wedding at a time like this? I mean, it
Mhm.
just seems antithetical to all the spirit of being married, and you're a newlywed, so you can take that
Mhm.
angle on it too. But yeah, talk to me about that.
For sure. So I would say, just as a word of opening,
Yeah.
um, I have had time that I've spent within the community in Lakewood.
Oh,
Um, Not at this point in time,
okay. Oh,
but
yes.
certainly years ago, there
Yes.
was a yeshiva there that I spent some time in. I have many friends within that community. Um, I think that they, at least now officially, have come around to seeing the policies that I mentioned before. But as you said, there are still families that are going out and trying to have weddings. There
Yeah.
are still things going on like that. So just to touch on it,
Yeah.
um, I think ultimately the question is kind of which side of that divide that I had outlined earlier do you fall
Mm,
on? And not so much on an institution level anymore, but on a personal level. If your family really believes strongly that if we come together, nothing's going to happen to us, and then they look around and say, all these people are being careful, but why should we be careful? We have God on our side. We're going to pray. We're going to make sure that everything's okay. And a lot of those times they have masks that they give out to people, and they try to not dance while holding hands, for example. Um, so they're going to look around and say, maybe this isn't so great of an idea that everyone's shutting down. And we should be trying to raise the joy in our lives and have people that are around and celebrating together. That's, I think, what their mentality is.
right.
I happen to not agree with that mentality so much. I know, for example, in Teaneck just last week, I had a friend who got married, and they got married in one of the house's backyard. It was just the families, and they streamed it on Facebook for people to see and for friends to celebrate with it.
Mm,
And I think that that's ultimately a better way of doing that.
right.
And I think that the large gatherings that are going on in not only places like Lakewood, but also places like Brooklyn, where there are these isolated cases of people who are going out and doing this, need to be commented on. We need to say that this is not something that we stand for, that this is something that these people are doing out of their own um, extreme piety,
Mm,
and that while it's a noble intention, it's not something that is safe right now. It's something that's actually putting lives in danger. And as a global Jewish community, we need to put our foot down and say that this can't be going on right now.
mm.
I think that's generally the approach to take, and that's an approach that many people have been taking on social media already, including rabbis within those communities.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's firm but fair. But you're certainly doing your best to see it from their point of view, and be critical, but not but fair. Yeah. And that's definitely an important approach, and to not be critical and judgmental, even if some of these gatherings are going against all of what we're being told, right? Like,
Mhm.
even if they feel fine and they do believe that in the strength of their family. So
Right. And it
moving,
does need to
yeah,
be emphasized, I think, also that on the official level, everyone is in agreement that these things have to stop.
right,
There was a joint statement put out last week that was, the Orthodox Union, which is all of my direct teachers, the Vod of Lakewood, which is all of the head rabbis in Lakewood, um, the Vod in Brooklyn, that's all the big rabbis there, Agudat Israel, which is the big, I guess you can call it ultra Orthodox umbrella organization, similar to what the Orthodox Union is for the more modern Orthodox community. Um, and they're all in agreement that we can't have big weddings, you can't gather in big groups, you need to kind of be socially distanced from each other.
yeah,
And so everyone who's doing other things are really making a personal decision based on their own internal calculations.
mm,
Officially, everyone's on the same page. All of the rabbis are on the same page. No one wants these things happening.
right,
And the people that are making those choices individually based on their own sense of what we need as a community.
Mm. I mean, I'm glad that they did put out a joint statement. I think it's important to hear from, the authorities of our communities in times like these, right? We need leaders. So, question about your friend who got married in Teaneck. I
Mhm.
mean, why? They certainly did the right thing by making it over Zoom and not having, not flaunting the rules and bringing in, hundreds of people to their backyard or the wedding hall where maybe it was originally planned. But what what was their reasoning for not putting it off for a couple months so that they
Mhm.
can do it in person? I mean, I
It's a
could
great,
speak, they would know more, but I'm sure
right.
yeah.
They would certainly know more than me.
Yeah.
Um, what I'll say is that as someone who is a newlywed who got married before this whole situation happened, and we're very relieved that we didn't push it any longer than we did.
Yeah.
Um, but as someone in that situation, I understand what they were going through, especially in the Orthodox Jewish community. Oftentimes, the apartment's already bought that they want to be living in. Sometimes they've already like finished up the lease at their other place. So it's the practical concerns of just wanting to be able to kind of move in there and be done with it. And also just in general, it's a very stressful period. It's very long waiting. Physical intimacy is not something that is, smiled upon in Orthodox Judaism before you get married.
Right.
And especially at a time like this where things are so uncertain, I incredibly um, understand
Mm,
the thoughts and emotions that were going through that.
sure.
And to be able to do it in a way that explicitly is in line with what people asked. There definitely were no more than 10 people who were at their wedding. It was literally in a backyard.
Right.
They made the chuppah, the canopy that they stand under themselves. Uh, was what in Judaism we call a Kiddush Hashem. It was able to kind of show the world that there are ways of doing this that are in line with the values that are put out and the safety precautions that are put out, but also to be able to do this and bring this happiness in. And especially while there are still families in other communities who are disregarding those rules, I think it was an incredibly important message that they sent out.
Mm.
And I really do feel honored to have been able to at least see on Facebook what was going on there.
Yeah.
I think it was tremendous.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. It really is a beautiful thing. I'm glad that they were able to do it in line with the rules and regulations, and people were able to see it online. I do understand it. Certainly, practically, yeah, it probably made a lot of sense. And in uncertain times, it's nice to have certainty, right? It's nice to
Mhm.
put the stamp on the wedding and be like, we're married now. Like it's not, we don't
Right.
have to
There
wait.
are there are also people who have been pushing off their weddings because of this,
Sure.
I should
Yeah.
say.
Right. Yeah.
I know another couple who they were planning on getting married in a week,
Mm,
and they sent out an email that this isn't going to be able to happen in the current situation. We're rescheduling the date,
right.
and we'll keep you posted.
Right. Yeah.
And I understand making that decision. I understand it's tremendously hard for them,
Yeah.
but sometimes that is what it is.
Right.
If you can do it in a way that guarantees that safety precautions are followed, then I think that that is a tremendous thing to do. And if
Totally.
not, it's far better to say that we're going to give this some time and wait for the situation to end so that we can then come together in a bigger way
Mm,
than to try to put something together now, knowing that it might end up violating those concerns and putting people in danger.
right. Right. We want to avoid that at all costs. Right. And I think even doing it over Zoom, I mean, that's a pretty great story.
Right.
Even though it's not the classic wedding story, it's certainly one that they will remember. And
Mhm.
possibly because there was less people there, they were able to maybe even connect a little bit more, right? I mean, sometimes weddings have so many people, so many things going on, so much love, it can be a little hard to focus. And
For sure.
you know, maybe it was almost a good thing. Who knows? But as you said, you're a newlywed. You are glad you didn't put it off. What is this like going through quarantine with your wife, who popped into frame just minutes ago?
For sure. So, like I said, I'm very happy that we got married when we did. I
Yeah.
really don't know how we would have handled, being quarantined with our respective families, a state away, dealing with that.
Mm,
Um, it's been a surreal kind of experience with this. She's working from home now. I'm in school from home now. We don't have a very big apartment. Um, But at the same time, we've been able to spend more time with each other. We've been able to really kind of grow together through this situation and being here to support each other. And we're still making sure that we're calling our families every day, that we're able to be in touch with our relatives, especially our older relatives. And we're really making the best of the situation. It's
Mm,
very it's very easy to kind of feel isolated and feel like we're stepping on each other's feet at times. But I think that we're able to really look past that and say, if we're going to be in the situation where we can't leave, at least we can't leave with each other.
right.
And that's been helping us get through it
Mm,
incredibly powerfully.
mm. Yeah, what's it like trying to find space in a small New York City apartment for just for a little alone time? Because I mean, of course, you
Right.
want to spend time with your wife, and no harm there. But yeah, I mean, is it? Have you been able to get outside a little bit at all? Do you have a mask? Are you staying safe? What's it like in that regard?
Right. So we were able to get outside. Um, Personally, this past week we haven't been just because I had a small cough last week, and while we're not worried about it, at the
Right,
same, it would be irresponsible to go out with any symptom whatsoever at a time like this.
right, right.
So we've kind of been self quarantining ourselves for now.
Okay,
Um, though it used to before then we were able to go out for groceries separately from each other, so that we were able to kind of do that.
good.
We've been alternating who works in the bedroom, who works in the dining room to be able to keep that kind of have
Right,
different views.
sure.
Um, and we have our work time versus our together time, and being able to keep those schedules has, I think, been very helpful.
Mm,
At the same time, it's been nice to be able to say, I'm a little overwhelmed, so I'm gonna come in here and just like read a book while you're working.
mm,
It's been
right.
very, very helpful for us that way.
Yeah.
Um, we haven't, thankfully, the only fever any of us have is a little bit of cabin fever, but we're able to work through that together, and that's, I think, what's really important.
Yeah, yeah, I think cabin fever is getting to all of us a little bit, but it's part of the adapting, right? Once we really admit to ourselves that this is the new normal for the next
Mm.
bit, it becomes a little bit easier. But yeah, certainly, I mean, this is not how we're meant to be as creatures, holed up inside, sitting on screens all day. Like this is antithetical to everything our bodies are telling us. So
Right.
that yeah, that's been hard for me certainly. Um,
Right. It's interesting that you had mentioned that. I'm just
yeah,
reminded.
yeah.
Um, so there was a rabbinic thinker in Israel who passed away over a decade ago at this point, Rav Shagar, and so he had an entire philosophy that was based around what is technology doing to us as a people.
Mm,
And so he said, kind of, you have this group of people who feel very strongly that, once you're looking at a phone so often that you're not looking around, people are just going to get sick of that and we're going to need to rebel against it and kind of return to an older mode of living.
mm,
But he said that he actually didn't agree with that philosophy. He
mm,
thought that technology actually allows, if used properly, for a way for us to get closer than we ever were before, to feel connected as a global community, to be able to use this technology to really form stronger relationships than we were able to before.
mm.
So I'm just reminded with you saying that it's true that we're not built to be sitting in front of a computer screen all day.
Right.
But while we have to be, the
Yeah.
question is, are we using it in a way that's productive or are we not?
Mm,
I'm sure there are a lot of people who are using it to just watch YouTube and Netflix all day.
sure.
But there are other people like you who are doing these talk shows who are able to really talk about these
Yeah.
important issues and to be able to grow with each other. I know I'm in a Facebook group that was for Jewish singles. I don't
Mm,
know why I'm still in the group, but regardless, I found myself still in the group. And I saw someone post and said, "Hey, we're gonna have a Zoom meeting for all of us together so that we can still get to know each other in this situation." And I
right.
thought that was really sweet. It was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, I think it is cool, and like virtual dates, and people are doing their best to keep the things that they loved about normal life afloat online. And yeah, I mean, you touched upon exactly why I am doing this, right? It is to try to foster a greater sense of empathy in our world and connectedness and togetherness, because it's very easy to take it for granted. And now in this state, it it's pretty hard to take it for granted, and it needs even more work. We really need
Mhm.
to work on it, and hopefully, the bonds that we do create and the strengthening of community and empathy and worldwide togetherness lasts after the pandemic. Like, I mean, it would be
Right.
great if we could enter a new world order, to use those to use that terminology,
Right.
after this, in a better sense, right? Like, we are, yes, technology. It's interesting because that, the rabbi, what was his name, from who died
Rav
so late?
Shagar.
Rav Shagar. It's interesting because, he wrote at a certain period of time when technology wasn't quite as intrusive and as invasive as it is right now. I'd be
Right.
interested to see and hear what he would say in this age, because it's increasingly hard to just use technology positively,
Mhm.
both in terms of, because it's so, so all encompassing, and but also because they've crafted technology to keep us hooked, right? They've gamified it in such a way that even if you are a person who's driven, and they're trying to get the best out of it, it can be so easy to fall prey to it, and to just sit at home and watch Netflix
For,
and YouTube, right? It requires more personal character and spirit than ever before, I think.
for sure. So just to throw in a quick plug, I'm actually moderating a
Hey,
panel this week
hey.
on exactly this issue. It's going to have rabbis who are a rabbi of a synagogue,
Huh.
a day school administrator, someone who runs a college campus Jewish community,
Hmm.
all talking about the kind of difference in approach that we've had with this, shift into digital from physical.
Hmm.
And one of them in particular shared with me that, spoiler alert for anyone who wants to tune into that now,
I'll tune
he's going to be touching on exactly that question.
in. Hmm.
We find ourselves in a room where technology is so intrusive, now more than ever, where we need to be forcing ourselves in front of a screen just
Yeah.
to have a semblance of our daily lives again. And so, not only how do we deal with it now, but how do we get out of it? Right? Once this pandemic is over,
Hmm.
are we going to be so addicted to this way of life that it's just going to become the new normal still? Or are we going to be able to say, I had a lot of that. I saw both extremes. So now we need to figure out a way to be moderate with it, to be
Hmm.
able to say, we know how many benefits there are and we know how strong it is, but we also know how important it is to be out in the real world, not with a screen in front of us. So let's be more careful to make that a consistent part of our lives.
Hmm.
And so I imagine different people are going to have different ways of dealing with that.
Totally.
But I hope, optimistically maybe, that we're able to come out of this with a happy medium. That we're able to say we've learned that technology can be more helpful than we ever thought it could, but we can also be more human than we ever thought we could.
Right.
And let's do both of that.
I think, yeah, that's right. We need that we need that balance more than ever now, and it will take a lot to harness. But I'm super interested to hear those perspectives. When is the panel? And I want you to
It's
send me a link.
Thursday night at 8:30.
Thursday night at 8:30. Okay, I'll have you send me a link so I
Yeah, I
post
can send
it
you
when
the
I
Zoom
post.
link.
Yeah, when I post this conversation in a couple days. I'll post it before Thursday, so that.
For sure. It'll be recorded, so even if you don't.
Okay, good. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, closing thoughts, Steve. Anything else about how this has been affecting you personally? Other relationships of yours, or just your mental health? How you holding up in the wake of this? And what was it like when it started? I think it's interesting, like, what was your reaction as it became more serious and as the news became more dire?
Right. So when I heard that it was potentially going to be the situation that it was going to be,
Mm.
um, my area thankfully was still largely unaffected at that point. So I just went out and I walked around the neighborhood for an hour or so,
Hmm.
just to get in that last breath of fresh air, before needing to kind of go inside for however long. And I'm very glad that I did that. Um, I'm very glad I did that at a time when it was safe to do that. Also, I don't know if I'd be so comfortable going out and doing that now. Um, but that was a big part of it.
Mm.
And just being able to reflect on, the ease of being able to just go out for a walk and just see people and give them a handshake.
Yeah.
These are all things that we took for granted that now barely if ever we're going to be doing for a while.
Mm.
So that was part of it. On the mental health end, having a therapist as just a go-to person to talk to, not even necessarily as a professional therapist, is incredibly important, I think, for everyone. Not only for people who are living alone, but for people who are just stuck inside with only the same people every day in and day out.
Yeah.
It's important to have someone to talk to that's different than that, to hear different voices, to kind of be able to still be a part of that. So just having a go-to, whether a friend or a therapist or a religious leader, to just talk to about these things and know that you're not alone is so incredibly important. And I urge the viewers here, if you don't have that person, to really find that person, because it will be invaluable to you
Mm.
as you continue on in this new existence that we're in for however long it lasts.
Mm. Definitely. We need those types of people more than ever. Someone, a listening ear is critical in a time like this. I mean, I know one of my neighbors who's a psychologist. She's been taking all her calls over Zoom or over the phone, and she's been busier now more than she's on the
Yeah.
phone for like 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
Mhm.
She almost had laryngitis last time I spoke to her, because she was like, I'm just not used to speaking this much. So that was of course concerning, but I mean, it is amazing that people can at least, they can still make these connections. They can still get that help that
Mhm.
they need, and they might not even realize they need, right?
Right.
Especially if they're used to living alone, or it just
Mhm.
falls into the background. We can become numb to our environments a little bit, but having someone to listen to you is huge. Okay, well, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
I do just want to add a quick caveat to everything that I said.
Yeah.
Though I'm a student at my institution, I can't pretend that I speak for them.
Right.
So I
Yes.
just need to
Yes.
make that clear.
Yes. No. Big disclaimer. Always good. Always
Yeah.
good.
If any of my rabbis are watching this, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Well, hopefully it gets that big that they do see it. But okay, Steve. Thanks so much. Episode 7 in the books.
All right.
Stay safe, and we'll keep in touch. And send me that Zoom link so I can
Will
post
do.
it.
Take
Okay.
care, Ruben.
You
Have a
take
good one.
care, bud. Thank you.